Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars Rebels episode review. This one is going to be for two episodes, the two-parter Ghost of Geonosis, I believe is the name for both episodes, I believe. Episode 12 and 13 of Season 4. Or Season 3, I mean, sorry. Getting mixed up with Sherlock, which I just reviewed just prior to this recording this video. So yeah, this was an interesting two episodes in that I think my fundamental reaction to these two episodes is that, like, it was two episodes for very little reason. There was no, I think, overly amazing reason for why these two episodes were made into, like, a two-parter. Why this story plot or whatever was made into a two-parter. The problem is ultimately that nothing happens. That by the end of these two episodes, nothing is accomplished, really. They gave some vague stuff at the end about, we can't fully make it clear that the Empire is, like, killing planets and stuff like that, but maybe it'll help rally other people to the cause and stuff like that. That's fine, but for this whole plot that is meant to, somehow, link into Rogue One, the only thing that really linked into Rogue One was Saw Gerrera and his character. I liked the Saw Gerrera stuff across these two episodes. I think it really helped to develop the character from transitioning him from his appearance in Clone Wars in the On the Run arc to where Saw Gerrera is in Rogue One the movie. I liked that aspect of this episode in terms of his character arc. Didn't need two episodes to do it. The problem, as I said, was ultimately that you come to Geonosis, the Empire are building something, we have to figure out what they're building. And it's just mystery, we're not telling you anything, mystery, we're not telling you anything. Oh look, here's a circle within inside a circle. We can't ever know that it's the Death Star because it's not time for that to happen, because that's what Rogue One is about. So we can only ever slightly allude to that happening, and that being the case. That, plus the fact that they just don't really mention, like, anything about the history of Geonosis. They mention roughly that, okay, the Empire wiped them out, but, like, for what reason? Like, this episode, I think they really wrote themselves into a trap here with this one, in terms of, ultimately, what this episode needed was for the Rebels to kind of discover the Death Star. They needed to learn something about the Death Star, but that can't happen because of other stuff. So it means that these two episodes are relatively pointless in that, to a degree, in that is the only aim, really, you were taking from these episodes. They get, in the end, get pretty vague in that, like, okay, this click-clack Geonosian is protecting a queen's egg, in terms of, like, okay, so the species is going to survive, in the implication that there's maybe a couple more down in the really deep sections of the planet. So the Empire didn't manage to completely wipe them out. But, like, ultimately what this episode I felt like needed to do was actually address the whole idea of, like, Attack of the Clones. We saw that the Geonosians were involved in the designing of the Death Star. We know from other canon material that the Geonosians were initially used as slaves to help build the Death Star in the kind of early stages before the construction was moved somewhere else, which is, obviously we're getting towards Rogue One era stuff, and then they decided, after some mining stuff, I think the Darth Vader comics covered this, that, like, they eventually just decided to kind of not quite nuke the planet, but obviously, like, sterilize the planet and kill all the Geonosians, obviously, so no, they never be able to tell that they were involved in the construction of the Death Star. That's interesting stuff. Unfortunately, none of that is really alluded to in this episode, except for the fact that, the Empire, like, sterilized the planet with this gas, but we can't really prove anything. We only have pictures, and just, again, like, clearly meant to be the picture that Click-Clack writes is meant to be the Death Star, but they interpret it as, like, it's the egg that they're talking about, or no, it's this thing, actually, it's the Imperial cog symbol representing the poison. But, like, no, like, to me, that's what this episode was. It was two episodes to basically ask your audience the question of, are you aware that the two circles that Geonosian is drawing is meant to be the Death Star? That's all this episode was in terms of, like, important stuff. But let's focus on Saw Gerrera. I liked this episode because I think one thing the movie didn't do was that they didn't reference Stila really. I like that this episode did, in that you had the hologram in the second episode, but you also had Rex talking about Stila in the first episode. And I really like that connection to the Clone Wars because it helps you understand, really, I suppose, what drives Saw as a character and why he is the way he is. In that, I don't, like, for me personally, Saw didn't stand out as, like, really anything as a character in the Onderon arc. He was just kind of there, the kind of slightly aggressive one. So here, them kind of establishing that, like, okay, he is still quite aggressive as a character, but that he's driven by kind of this grief. He's for the rebellion. He has his own rebel cell. But he's very, like, if you don't immediately tell me what I want to know, you are my enemy and I will hurt you to get what I want. Very much bordering on extreme, and like as Hera talks about the Kanan, like the allusions to like he's known to be extreme, and like what happened to him, and like I like that they addressed the character arc of like it was the loss of Stila that changed him and made him this way, that he doesn't want to lose anyone else like that, and in his mind this Geonosian click-clack kind of led to the loss of his squad, and just other things like that. Like later on in the episode, I think you had that moment of like, okay, he's not fully gone just yet. That he was still in the end able to make a connection with the Geonosian in the sense of this egg represents the continuing of his species. It's family to him. He needs to keep this thing alive, and Saw was in the end happy to let him go and continue his species. I like that moment because it kind of highlighted the moment in Rogue One, of course, where Jin comes to see Saw, and before that, Saw is just kind of crazed, like he's not believing anyone, like Bodhi defects and he still won't believe him, and then you get Jin coming in, and you see he sees her reaction to the hologram message from her father, and I think in that point he also makes that familial connection once again, and realizes kind of how far he's gone and the problems, and then moves to make a kind of change and kind of accepting his death, that like he's lost so much of his body in the war, being extreme. In the end, all for Stila. It's why I wish there would have been a moment in the movie where he talked about Stila in the movie. I think that would have really brought everything together, in that right now the way it seems to be is that the movies don't reference anything. The only thing the movies reference is the movies, but the show is allowed to reference like movie stuff and everything else. That I kind of don't like that the writing of the movies doesn't feel the need to ever try to make much of a connection. Like there was that moment in Rogue One where like there was General Syndulla over the radio. So I think that was meant to be Hera, because obviously at that point in time, I'm not sure, because obviously Hera's father is kind of still sort of part of the rebellion, but we don't really know for sure. So, you know, that reference of just someone Syndulla in Rogue One was interesting for me, over the intercom. So I don't really know what that necessarily means for the future of like Rebels or anything like that. It was just a little throwaway thing, but it was the only reference really in Rogue One to like our Rebels for the most part. Anything else in this episode was like, there was a fun moment, like obviously Rex knows Saw, so like their interactions were interesting in terms of Rex trying to calm him down. You had that interesting moment where Kanan was the one using his force powers to help the two of them cross the bridge, and then Saw makes the comment, "Oh, I forget the Jedis can use their force powers to do all this crazy stuff," and Rex is just like, "Yeah, he's no Skywalker," and Kanan's like, "Hey." I like that moment, in that like Rex is so used to being around Jedi, like Anakin, like Obi-Wan, who were like some of the best Jedi, that actually being around Ezra and Kanan is like, he can see the difference in skill, and that Anakin could do insane things with the Force that the others can't, and he's just kind of noting that. I like that as a little moment. But I think at the core, you know, there's that shield plot with the first episode that kind of sort of got forgotten as the episode kind of went on. You know, they kind of brought it together at the end. But as I said, I don't really get why this was made into 2 episodes. the plot of this has no impact because they didn't learn anything. Saul was interesting, but I question how many episodes he's going to appear in again. I feel like this was a relatively one-off appearance. We may see him once or twice more. I'm not sure. And then, like, are we ever going to come back to Geonosis to see what's happening here? Like, this setup of, like, the Genosian species continuing, like, are we ever going to come back and, like, reference what's going on there? Like, are they alive or what? So in that sense, you know, like, I sort of enjoyed, I found interesting the idea of, like, Ezra making a pretty big connection to Click Clack and kind of really understanding what that meant to him, and, like, for who Ezra is as a character, I think it made sense that he would be very supportive of that. But again, I think there were aspects of this episode that kind of just struggled overall. Like, even though it was 2 episodes, it still didn't bring everything together in the end. So that's basically my thoughts on the episode. Just the main core of what I kind of have to say is just that, like, there was no need for this to be a 2-parter, really, at all. It just didn't have the impact of, like, you know, a mid-season premiere for the second half of the season, and then going forward in terms of, like, the trailer stuff, the only thing that stood out to me for the second half of season 3 trailer was the Sabine and her mother stuff. That seems to be like it's going to be given at least 2-3 episodes. I'm interested in that because it seems like they're finally going to commit and deliver on some interesting Sabine character stuff, which could be very interesting. Depends on the writing. And then Obi-Wan Maul. It felt like they were kind of going to do that duel, just the 2 of them, which I really want. I do not want, like, Ezra and Kanan getting involved in that battle, like, basically at all. I think that has to be Obi-Wan versus Maul, and, like, little to no interference from the other Jedi characters. I think it's just I think there's such impact behind the Maul and Obi-Wan rivalry that you just have to have Obi-Wan be the one to kind of end this. It's just... They've been trying to obviously make the connection between Ezra and Maul. It's been interesting, but I don't think it's anywhere near as big as the connection between Maul and Obi-Wan. So that's my basic thoughts on the trailer. Nothing else stood out to me that much. That's why I haven't done a trailer analysis video. But yeah, I'm just going to end the video there. So they're my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episodes. Also... But yeah, links in the description to my Twitter, Tumblr, Patreon campaign, and PayPal donation link if you want to follow me on social media or support my channel. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.